Childcare costs inhibit access. Why is childcare important? Well, findings indicate that the presence of childcare facilities help lower the unemployment rate. They generate revenue on state and national levels, and they provide social and cognitive development opportunities and the opportunity for personal growth. They're also important because they allow for people to be able to work rather than staying at home with children. Dynamic changes in both the cost of living and family structures have resulted in an increased need for childcare in the United States. What is meant by that is if you look, things aren't how they were back in the 1800s. Childcare was looked at as a last resort for the unfortunate children that had to stay at the nursery schools rather than with their mothers because their mothers had to go to work. Nowadays, being a single mom, it's more normal than beforehand. So these situations don't even have to apply to women that are single. A lot of times people can't get by with just one income. That applies to my family as well. I have a 2-year-old, but I also work part-time because I can't afford childcare throughout the week. And even if I did, go try to work somewhere full time, the cost outweighs the benefits. In North Carolina, childcare it costs about $9,000 a year. That's $771 a month. That's more than rent, for me at least. Economists only suggest paying 7 to 10% of your income. However, many people are paying upwards of 20%. Even with childcare vouchers, you will be expected to pay 7% of your income. And not always are these childcare vouchers available to people who need it. There is a wait list, typically in Catawba County. That's where I live. My sister has tried multiple times, but she's gotten to a point where she's just working at the childcare facility and paying half of her check a week to have her daughter there as well. The cost increases income inequality because the cost of childcare outweighs the advantages of working. That means overall, poor people, they're less likely to actually go and get childcare. They'll be more likely to stay at home, thus not making as much income. So the United States as a collective needs to reform childcare legislation in order to make it more accessible to all, in order to increase quality of life and local economies. By giving people the opportunity to work without having to worry about childcare, they're able to make more money, obviously, thus put more money back into their local economies. So a couple solutions that I came up with during the research process would be either to advocate for universal childcare legislation, advocate for an increase in childcare subsidies through the state, advocate for increased government regulation of childcare enrollment costs, and advocacy for reallocation of state funding. So with the first one, the universal childcare legislation, parents could work full-time. Taxes will probably be increased, but there will be an increased child enrollment opportunity, and the economy will most likely be stimulated. To advocate for an increase in childcare subsidies, sometimes it's difficult for people to find resources that relate to obtaining the childcare subsidies. A lot of the online resources are vague, and you will have to go up to your local social service offices, which isn't always an opportunity for people who don't have transportation. So there is a lack of accessibility, and that gives the potential for childcare prices to increase due to the available assistance. So for the next one, the advocacy for increased government regulation of the costs, that would be like the government coming in and capping costs of childcare rather than letting them compete with each other. So that would make enrollment more affordable, but there may be enrollment may be a certain price, and then the cost will be increased by other things like fees for diapers, food, activities. For private institutions, there may not be a requirement for them, so they could increase the the availability of them, and there's a good chance that child care quality will be lower. For the advocacy of reallocation of state funding, so there would be more child care vouchers available, but it's a good possibility that they're taking away from other social programs like food stamps. So the solution that I chose was to advocate for universal child care legislation. Um, so I chose this because it seemed to have more positive implications rather than negative. Like, yes, of course, there is an overall increase in taxes. I'm not sure the percentage because they haven't came up with that yet. But it would just make it more available for families. And to create an artifact for this, I decided to make a website to advocate for childcare for Working Families Act. So this is my artifact. Please excuse my son crying in the background. So here I have the overview. It just pretty much talks about how the family dynamic has changed over time. I have a block quote here that says, under the CCWFA, which is the Child Care for Working Families Act, the median family of four in every state will spend no more than $45 each week on child care, no matter how many children they have. That really helps out a lot for people who have multiple children, because for just one child at the kinder care facility that my sister works at, it's $160 a week. I have a picture here of the senator who proposed the act. She is a advocate for childcare accessibility, obviously. But some of the facts about childcare is that it is one of the biggest expenses, and in 33 states, infant care is more expensive than college. So pretty much on my artifact, I provided childcare facts and how we can accomplish affordable childcare. So this website does pretty much advocate for this act. I provided these facts, to give people the opportunity to see what the reality is on the cost of childcare. Then I gave people the option to figure out what you can do to help. I have a link here. It takes you to the act itself on the Congress website. I'm not going to make us read all that. But the Child Care for Working Family Act, it would create 770,000 new jobs and allows for a lot of parents to go back to work. Here's a couple facts about it. Under the Child Care and Working Family Act, 3 and 4 children ages 12 and under would be income eligible for child care assistance. And the median family's child care payment would not exceed $45 a week. All child care workers would earn a living wage. Okay, so that's important because my sister, she's a lead teacher. She has her early childhood certifications, and she's still only making $9 an hour. And half of her income is going back into the child care facility since her daughter's there. Child care costs would be dependent on income and just not for people who apply for the vouchers. So this is a layout chart of what the cost would be. If you make 0 to 75% of the median income, you wouldn't have any copayment and so forth. So it's really accessible for all people. Even if you make above the median income, you still only have to pay 7% or less. So this questionnaire lets you know if you would be benefiting from the Child Care for Working Families Act. If you answered yes to any of them, then you definitely would be. So at this point, this is where I let people know that they can take action. You can take action by contacting your senator and letting them know that you want them to support this act. and I provided a link to for senator contact information. This is all the states. You can choose either by your state or the senators themselves. And you can also share this graphic to your friends or anybody that you feel needs to know this information. Um, it just gives little bullet points like they ensure families don't pay more than they can afford on childcare, support universal access to high quality preschools, and invest in childcare educators with better training and pay. And as a final thing for people to do is to go vote. You can vote for people who support the universal child care platforms. We don't make the legislation, but we choose the legislators. So for people who aren't registered to vote or don't know information about voting, I provided a link to. So yeah, this is my artifact.